thing I really want you to share with everyone, and this just turned me on so much yesterday when we were talking about it, is the idea of sovereignty. Like sovereignty is a word that is, like you hear it a lot, like you've been hearing it a lot more and more recently. And I think it's used in a lot of different ways, but it's a concept that I believe it's really, really powerful, and especially powerful right now when we're in a time of like disorientation. So I would just love for you to share how you view sovereignty and how you understand it for everyone.
Okay, perfect. Yes. So yesterday we were chatting about this, and for me, sovereignty really comes back to the root of the word. So sovereignty is really about the reign of one over of a kingdom. And so sovereignty for me is the reign of ourself, of our own queen or divinity, our queen codes, that we are actually resourcing or relating to ourself as the ruler of our reality. So sovereignty is coming back to our own divinity, coming back to our own knowing and our own inner resourcing for the truth and the wisdom that is that actually is aligned with us. And it's understanding that there is no one in your life that is higher or that is in more power than you are around and of your own reality. And so sovereignty is coming back to that still point of saying, I actually am the queen, I am the authority, and my voice and my power is the reigning principle within my life. And as such, I command how I create this existence and this reality that I partake in. So it's a lot about self-responsibility, but ultimately it's about incredible divinity and power and grace. That's what sovereignty means to me. And that's how I feel to draw women back to that alignment within.
And, we're both birth workers. We both hold birth as like a really sacred rite of passage for women. And this is a piece of like that activating that sovereignty, or, bringing it forward so a woman can really operate from that place, I think is so important in birth. And it's unfortunately very often the opposite of what we see in birth, right? We've been trained, over thousands of years culturally to sort of abdicate our sense of sovereignty to the medical system or to doctors or to whatever it is. So how can a woman really reclaim her sovereignty, and how can we as birth workers inspire that in another?
Yeah, wow. I love how you use the word abdicate, because when we're speaking about sovereignty and the throne of our own self, our divinity, our power, it really is an abdication of sovereignty. It is an abdication of power. And this is something that we don't fully recognize as a concept. And so we live in a world where the power is already from a very young age, we know the power goes over to the doctor. My doctor knows my body better than me. No, your doctor knows anatomy and physiology and the Western medical tradition better than you. Nobody knows your body better than you. You live inside of it. People can help guide you to the wisdom of what you are feeling and why and how you are feeling it in that particular way. But actually what you say about your body is the final rule. And whether or not that's something that people like, and whether or not that's what an OBGYN or a GYN wants to hear, or another birth worker or somebody, a midwife that's being pushy, or even your own doula, at the end of the day, it is your voice that governs your body. And I think that for me, it just comes to how informed can we be that we can really hold that ground, just from an emotional perspective, but from a deeply educated, inspired, and empowered perspective, that we really honor and respect everyone in the space with us. But moreover, we're coming back to that inner reign of our own sovereignty, that actually our voice is the final voice around what we want, unless it's in a life-threatening situation, in which case it's quite often that if you don't have consciousness, someone will make a decision for you, which I think we can all agree is a good moment to that abdication has happened. But in general, it's really about that, like, let's educate from the very beginning, even before conception, preconception, but let's educate women about their body. Let's educate them with the resources to use their intellect, their intuition, and their instinct in an empowered way, in an aligned way, all of them making a sort of a beautiful alignment that is really coming through and actually shifting the reality that we enter, particularly the birth room, with.
Yeah. Oh, this is so powerful. And I know this is something that a lot of, people that are birth workers, that are, keepers of birth, really, really, um, really want to inspire in their clients, right? Really want to inspire. And sometimes what happens is a woman won't really step into that role of sovereignty until she's seen that the other way doesn't work, right? I personally lived this journey of having a birth where I was like, okay, I'll listen to everybody but me, and hope for the best, and the best does not come from that, right? So for me, having that, like, that contractive experience, that difficult experience, was the activating moment to help me really step into my sovereignty and be like, exactly what you said. I know my body better than anyone. I know what my needs are, and I'm going to stand for that no matter what. And I think there's always this question of, is there a way that somebody other than the woman herself can support that activation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The answer is 100% yes, but that person who is supporting that activation needs to understand, from my perspective at very least, that rite of passage is a rite of passage of feminine leadership. Those archetypes go back to Kali, to Green Tara. I mean, you name it, any tradition, and you will find that that archetype of the protective mother, the no that says yes, that I'm not doing it your way because I'm saying yes to myself. And that activating principle is actually something that instinctually is motherhood. So it's a really important thing for all women to understand, not just in the birth room. And we can guide women through somatic processes to get in contact with that, putting your foot down, standing and speaking your truth, having it that your foot, when it goes down, moves up your base and into your heart, and your no is a compassionate no. You can have the wrath and the rage of the worlds behind you and still have your heart open, because your heart is open to yourself in that moment of protection. And we as women who have been through that journey, and potentially as men as well, my work is very much with women, so I feel that I can't speak to a gender I don't embody. But as women, as leaders, we have all been put through that test. As mothers, we have all been put through that test one or another time. And if we can understand that that power must be resourced from within, but there are ways that we can contextualize that challenge for another woman, to invite her to really understand that there's going to be an apex, there's going to be a moment where she's going to put her foot down and the reality is going to shift around her. She's going to say, like, death to one reality and birth to a new one in that moment. Then we can empower and prepare her for that moment, and to really understand the somatic and physiological transitions that are happening with that, whether that's in her workplace, whether that's a day-to-day thing, or whether that's in the birth room. And it's a very important thing in the birth room, because it is that descending energy that actually is part of those final moments of push. So, yes, I do believe that we can empower one another. What is a common mistake is that other women will try to protect one another in this way, where it's like, I'll use my Kali force to protect her. And it's like, no, it's a rite of passage. She needs to use that for herself. That is a rite of passage. When we understand that, we can really hand the reins over and deeply believe, like, yes, instinctually, you know this and you've got this.
I think what you're saying is so important, right? Because as birth workers, we have this tendency to mother the mother. And if we put this into the analogy of a mother raising her child, what do we want for our child? Yes, we want to keep them safe and protected, and for them to have a good experience and a good life. But if we act as that helicopter mom, they might not ever develop those skills to really stand on their own feet. And the thing that I think is really interesting right now with this pandemic, and a lot of, doula care having to be virtual doula care, is I think it's creating an opening for exactly what you're talking about. When you can't be there in person, and you can't put your hands on someone, and you can't rescue them physically with your touch, there's so much more of a greater need to actually empower them in their own sovereignty, the way you are talking about. So I think, even though I know this is a really hard time for women to birth, I think there's something really special about this, both for the birthing women and for the birth community as a whole, to really take our levels of empowerment to the mother to a whole new level.
Oh, wow. Full body chills. I
Yeah.
could not agree more. And I think that what's interesting is that when you say the birth community, in my mind, I'm really thinking of the doctors and the midwives as well, because yesterday during our interview, actually, I was on a call before and afterwards with a client who was giving birth at that time. And it was like first baby, 7 hours, like freight train, full moon baby. And in the middle of the call, I was just there connecting with her breath. And for me, the role of me as a birth worker is like, I'm going to lend my somatic space. I'm going to breathe with you. I'm going to move with you. Sometimes I find myself like almost wanting just to take off my clothes and labor, but it's like, I just need her to know and feel that she's not alone in the space of expanding her energy and her field. And that for me is what I'm really there for. It's to allow her the permission to really use her voice, use her breath. I'm laboring, there. And I want her to feel permission to go into that space, because only she's going to birth that baby. And I want to be as much of a support as I possibly can, mostly in a non-cerebral way. And what I found so interesting was that there I was on this call, and then all of a sudden I just hear her, and these are concerns you have about your clients. Are they going to be able to use their voice in that moment? Are they going to say what their needs are? And, in that moment, I remember hearing the bathroom door open and her just going, get out, just get out. Oh, for God's sake, lock the door. And I was just like, mama, woo! It was like, wow. And, the woman was like, I need to take your blood pressure. And she turned, she's like, well, I need to have a baby. I just thought like, good Lord, And it was like, it's that moment of like realizing, wow, there's a way we're all in this together. And there's a way that birth care has become overbearing, not just on the side of the OBGYN, but on the side of the whole community being very protective. And I feel it, I get it. But we've almost forgotten our space of sisterhood and womanhood support in that role. And you are so right. Like, you have hit the nail on the head. This is a time where we are being asked to step back and remember what it truly means to embody support for that woman and hold space. That is the job, to hold that space.
Yeah. And I think it's, I mean, this is really apparent in birth, but I think this is systemic. This idea of like not swooping in to rescue, whether it's your children or your friends or your parents, or, not swooping in to rescue when someone is in a moment of intensity, but really holding space for them to root down and access that, that feminine wisdom, that primal wisdom, and really bring forth their own power.
You are giving me like full body tiger chills, I couldn't agree with this more, because actually that is the rite of passage. No matter how much I can feel a birth in my body, no matter how much I can feel a descent or a dilation or any of these beautiful, beautiful skills that we can develop if we go into our medical intuitive that we all have inside of us and that somatic body, at the end of the day, I am not birthing that child. I am supporting that woman with my somatic space, my breath, and my permission, my full body permission for her to birth that. And I do feel that that is a systemic thing. It's very much that there is an overbearing archetypal misconception of what mother means in our culture. And that's really culture wide. And I feel like right now is a time where that is getting thrown out. It's deeply being reprogrammed. And birth has an enormous role in that.
That's for sure. I love how you speak about somatic wisdom. And I think this place of, I just need to formulate the thought. So this place of like really deep grounding, this place of like really reaching within, right? And like finding that strength, finding that energy, finding that power within our body. It is a somatic journey. It is something that happens within our sensations, within our feeling space. And it's not something that we can necessarily do in our heads, right? Like, we can support with our minds, we can support with mantras and, inspiration and thoughts and information and education with our minds. But the root of this source of power lives in our bodies. And I know that you and I are both really, really passionate about the body and about somatic wisdom, especially. I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit about how you support women to prepare for birth, because I think this is a really big piece. I think there's a lot of, to this day, when we talk about like birth support, there's a lot of presence in the birthing room, and there's increasing desire to have that support in the birthing room. But I think the place where we're still sort of lagging is the awareness that actually we need to prepare our bodies, we need to train. And I like how when you were talking yesterday, when we had this conversation yesterday, you said, yes, but the training is for an unraveling. It's not for an achievement. So I just want you to speak a little bit to that piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can definitely say that for me, the education piece and the cerebral piece, as you're saying, it's really important for me to really educate and train women for birth. And as I was saying yesterday, because it's for an experience that is definitely like an Olympic experience, but it's not about an apex of achievement, but rather an unfurling, it's actually about the depth of surrender. And so I have found in the education of women for birth or for any self-empowering, really taking the power back over their body, that the cerebral piece, the education piece is really, really important. And the reason is because I find that it lets the mind down. When a woman's like, so we have to go into the body for this experience. Okay, got it. And everything is like perfectly, she's like, okay, I get it. That's safe. I'm not just going on a journey. This is where we need to go. Right. Then the hypervigilance lets down, right? And that hypervigilance center in women is like 3 times the size, if not more, than in men, and for good reason. But so for me, that education piece, that cerebral piece, is like, yes, it's important because it bolsters the permission to go deeper within the body. And I know that a lot of women will really trust me to go on that journey in my clinic, in the birth room, or even just in classes, because they know that if they need it fully explained, I will explain it to a T. But there's no way to bypass what it actually means to go through and into the surrender of the body. There is no way to bypass the moment where we have to let go into that somatic experience. And that doesn't have to be a scary experience or some kind of like underworld journey. It can be bit by bit. But that permission piece, it does come with that education. It does come with that feeling safe, that letting down of the hypervigilance. And that's really what allows us to realize that it is an unraveling. It really is about feeling fully safe to completely surrender and open. And that's what birth is. It's very unusual for women. It's difficult for them to understand fully that a child leads your birth, that your job is to surrender around a child, to fully communicate with that child. It's still, you still find it even after a woman's been through a whole pregnancy, talking to the baby. When you're in labor, you say, speak to the baby, tell him or her what's going on right now. And she looks at you like, oh, I thought that was just for the pregnancy. Really, right now? Can you even see what's happening to me? And it's like, yes, really, right now. This is a co-created process. And ultimately, all of the training you did was to get out of your own way so that birth can pass through you in a way where you are so deeply trusting, because you know that wisdom lives inside of you and you were born to do this.
Yeah. Oh, that's so well put. And I love how you said, really understanding what you're doing gives you the permission to drop into your body. And when you have that permission, that body journey that you take, this unraveling, the way you describe it, it can feel, especially for women who have experienced trauma or abuse on some level, that can feel really scary, right? Because you've spent a whole lifetime being out of your body. But I also want to say that, and I know we talked about this a little bit yesterday, that this is true for every woman to an extent, right? You said yesterday, and I thought this was so hot, you said that ecstasy is our birthright, but not necessarily our inheritance. And our inheritance is patriarchal conditioning. Our inheritance includes witch burnings. Our inheritance includes a ton of misogyny and a ton of violence against women, right? So we are all, to an extent, holding this disassociation from the body and our feminine power as a result of that.
Yeah.
Talk more about.
That's absolutely true. Well, it's interesting, right? Because it is our birthright in that it's our physiology. we have the capacity for birth and for gestation and creation on so many different levels. This is not just about birth. This is really about our sovereignty as divine creators or creatress of our own reality, which is the role of the feminine. This is not to exclude men. This is literally the spiritual and energetic anatomy of what it means to be incarnated as a female, which we're choosing, right? If your spiritual belief says so. But my belief is that we're choosing this when we're coming in. And so this is not something that is happening to us in a way that is unfair. There is a way that we are choosing the birthright and the experiences that come with having this incredible womb and this incredible like matrix of manifestation that lives within our physiology. And yet within that physiology is not just that divine blueprint or that imprint for us to really take in energy, right? Whether that's physical, a sperm, or whether that's just every day passing through the street, and to gestate and then to generate. Okay. And this is something we have. However, we also have cells, right? We also have our cells, we have our DNA, we have our emotional blockages and fields, we have what's in our blood and our bloodlines. And so this is where I'm saying, like, your birthright is bliss. It's ecstasy. The human orgasm is basically the same frequency as the Schumann frequency. If you were in perfect alignment with your carbon-based cellular vibration as a soul here on earth, you would be in the vibration of orgasm. Like, that's where you would be. It's a high vibrational state that we have. And yet to unwind what's there in the cells, to unwind our inheritance, whether that is genetic, emotional, or collective, as you are speaking to, it is an effort. It is a training and an education. But again, it's that training and education to unravel what's there. Yeah. It's not more layers. It's not more we have to achieve or learn, but rather it's a remembering. It's actually what we're coming back to. And this is where I really try to educate women from this place where it's like, wow, that was definitely a lot of content and it felt really cerebral, but actually I just feel like I just felt like I was remembering, like somehow I knew everything she said, even about the anatomy and physiology stuff that I've never studied, because, that's where I'm really trying to come from, this embodied space of sovereignty, to share that with women. Like, but do you remember? And so even all the words, you can say whatever you want, and yet underneath it is this whisper of like, but do you remember? And that whisper goes into deeper than the cells. It's an energetic whisper that recalls out of a woman, like, oh yes, I do, I remember. And we all have that capacity to pass that on to one another as a living transmission of the feminine. And this is what, for me, is a part of my passion in birth, is like to call that out of women. And it's my passion with women in general, but I really feel that this is what will impact birth. And I know that you feel the same way.
Oh yeah, I'm like jitter. Like, you guys can't see me, but I'm like jumping around in my seat. I feel like I could squeal. I'm so excited. And, a big part of this, I just want to share to everyone that's watching and listening, is Eva will be joining me this year for the Ecstatic Birth Practitioner training that starts in June. She's going to be coming on as a guest teacher and sharing some of her wisdom with our group. And I'm so thrilled about that, because I think all these things that you're sharing that are really, they're so potent, and they're also so necessary for this time. They've always been necessary, but I think especially now with everything that's going on, more necessary than ever before. And I'm so excited to have you bring your wisdom to the practitioners that take this training, so they can really hold the space and bring it to their clients, and we can ripple out in that way. So I'm just so excited. Like,
I cannot wait.
We're gonna have so much fun.
You're not ready?
Yeah, so I just, I know that you and I could probably chat on these topics forever. I just have one more thing that I want you to touch on, because I want every woman listening to this to realize how relevant this is, whether or not you're giving birth, whether or not you work in birth. I want every woman to realize how important this is, just walking on this planet. So I would love you to talk a little bit about, there are certain gifts that a woman gets from taking this path, this unraveling, this accessing that like deep primal power, that yes, birth is a rite of passage, and it's a very powerful rite of passage, but you don't necessarily have to be giving birth or have to have given birth to access this wisdom. So I just want you to speak a little bit about that, and also like, what are the gifts that women take beyond birth from this wisdom? so people can really see how powerful it is, not just in the birthing room, but beyond.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the main thing I think there is just this reclamation of understanding the incredible power that we can resource within our animal, instinctual, but also divine bodies. When we really merge these bodies deep within us, and this happens within the womb, this happens within the ovaries, this happens through the vaginal canal and through the structures of the clitoris and all of our, basically our erotic anatomy. This is where we're grounding down this wisdom. And this is beyond birth in that it's also fertility. It happens also through our menstrual cycle that we can tap into this wisdom. And the thing is that we all have the blueprints for birth within us, even if we are actually experiencing infertility or we are never becoming a mother, for example. The same way that we can all tap into the cycles, and even men have hormonal cycles, so too can we tap into the capacity for birth. And birth is a material version, a material manifestation of an innate spiritual quality that we all have. And we may choose to express that in our life in a symbolic way through the birth of a company or through the gestation of a creative endeavor. But this quality, if you are a female, it belongs to you. That is the birthright that we are speaking to. And that process of gestation and that cyclic element of what it really means to birth something that happens and takes off is something that we all have access to. And we really need to reclaim, I think if we can fully understand that our spirituality is very tied to our physicality, then we can really understand that when we fully reclaim birth as a physical thing on this planet, that we reclaim that space, that's when we can really understand how pertinent this is to every woman on the face of the planet, because it truly, truly is. This is something that goes far beyond just birthing children. This has to do with our innate capacity as creators of our own reality or creatress of our own reality. And the gifts that women have from birth, if you have met a woman who has tried to be, for example, a CEO before she's had children, and then afterwards, like right now I have full chills. I want to speak out to, for example, one of the founders of Mum's World in the Middle East. She said to me, like, if I didn't have my two, I'm like, how do you do this with two kids? If I didn't have two kids, I would not know how to do this. And that's a top Forbes Middle East company, you know. The power that a woman can resource when she knows what her body can do fully and she's embodied that state, whether that's through birth or another very powerful and potent somatic birthing experience, that is a power that is literally unfuckwithable. It is something so potent. And this is something that I really hope that we can slowly as a culture reclaim. And for me, the visual, like the actual thing that I will be able to see on the planet that lets me know that we have reclaimed it on every other symbolic level of our sovereignty is when birth itself shifts. Because that is the material counterpart to this spiritual process. And for me, it's like that message I'd really love to impart to women who don't feel that birth concerns them, that it only concerns pregnant women or this or that. It's like, no, this actually really deeply concerns all of us, because it has to do with an innate, either latent or potent potential within each of us. And I just find that a really important message. And I know that the more we do this work, the more evident that will become to women. I'm seeing it already. I'm seeing more and more women who are like, I don't know if I'll ever have kids, but I just need to study being a doula. There's just something in it. And they're waking up, they're getting that there's something in this process that belongs to all women for all time, everywhere.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I feel like from the time that I gave birth to my children, now almost 13 years ago, my youngest, and 17 years ago, my oldest, 13 years ago, there wasn't so much information on these topics that we're talking about. And it's really blossomed in the last 10 years. And I feel very hopeful that we're making a tremendous amount of progress. And at the same time, you look at countries like Brazil that have a 90% C-section rate, or South Africa that, is up there as well, or even in the US at 35% or so. And you feel at the same time, like as a birth worker, that can feel really heavy. That can feel really disheartening. That can feel like, oh, how can I actually create the change that I want to bring out into the world? And this is why I'm so passionate about the Ecstatic Birth Practitioner training program. I'm so passionate about having you come in, because what we do in that program is taking this journey for ourselves, so we can really stand for this in our own bodies and also lean on each other within community. So when we hit those moments of like, oh, this just, you know, like those transition moments of the, I just don't know if I can do this anymore, we can really lean on each other and support. I think it's so, so important for every birth worker to take this journey for themselves.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with that more. That was so beautifully said.